I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a weekend it was. More Trump tantrums, more Twitter-tastic nonsense coming out of the Trump Twitter handle, and expected. Look, perfectly expected with his right-hand man, Manafort, the fate of his life in the hands of, well, a handful of jurors. And look, I'm literally shocked. Day 3 came, went, no verdict. 9:30, I guess 9:30 tomorrow morning. 9:30 in the morning, they will reconvene. They will begin again to look at this. I'm still sitting here and I'm thinking, how is it possible? How is it possible that there's no verdict yet? I mean, from what I read and the stories that I saw, I don't know how you can not find the guy guilty. I just, no idea. And maybe they're just being, very, very thorough. Maybe they're, just, wanting to make sure that all of the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, all of that stuff. I don't know. But nothing. Now, we will. Today was the first day of school for my kids. They all got on the bus. They all went to school, all dressed up in their first day of school garb, all of that. Very exciting, very hopeful for them. And I'm pretty happy about that. But here's the thing that kind of interesting. My email box is filled with all of this back to school stuff. And, buy your this, buy your that. Hey, get your kid into this program and that. Hey, there's this privatized math tutor and this privatized, science and this privatized this and all, hey, how about having this guest on to talk about how wonderful charter schools are and how wonderful, all of these gimmicks are. And hey, how about this person who's an expert on, this gimmick? And most of it I just kind of throw away. But one story in particular grabbed my attention. And it was Fox News, Maria Bartiromo, I think that's how you pronounce her name, had a guest on talking about bulletproof backpacks. And evidently, the answer was kind of like, duh, hello, have you not been paying attention to your own news? Have you not been seeing that your own kids are being shot in school? Have you not figured that out? The question is, why did you decide to bring these to the U.S.? And the woman was very nice. She goes, okay, in the U.S., sadly, there are the guns. Everybody can have a gun. So here, kids need to be protected. And we have the fact that there are some school issues. So We need to bring this to the United States. So tell us how it works. And, you know, he's got the backpack. And in the backpack, you jam this heavy plate. Because as the woman goes into later, you know, well, you know, kids aren't as strong and they're not as fat yet. So, you know, you have to have a solid base. You can't have like the policemen have, which is, you know, just where the bullet won't go through. So you absorb the hit, but the bullet doesn't actually enter you and tear you to pieces. So in this, you're talking about carrying now a bulletproof plate. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, where's the room for the books? You know, or are we now going to buy our kids backpacks solely so that they have something to hide behind? And as my wife pointed out, it's kind of a fail, because at least where my kids go to school, the backpacks have to be in the locker. You can't take them to class because they're kind of a distraction. So if they have to be in the locker and they're not in the class where a lot of these shootings seem to happen, what good is it? And they're rather expensive. I mean, you know, I think the numbers that when I was looking for them online, you know, somewhere near $100 to have, you know, a bulletproof backpack, like $100. And I'm going, well, I guess, you know, if it's going to save your life. And I got to wonder, you know, will it stop, you know, a high round, you know, a high velocity round, one of the ones that you know, we see coming out of these AR-15s. But it got me to thinking, you know, is this the future of the country? Because you know what we're not talking about? I'm not talking about the gun. The gun is not the problem anymore. Evidently, it's the backpack. We now need fashion, high fashion stuff. High fashion is what we now need to have this. It's really just very, very bizarre and very, very odd as far as I'm concerned. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. You know, are we now going to be dressing our kids in the bulletproof backpacks with the, you know, maybe sweatshirts, maybe, bulletproof pants, or maybe just like in a bubble, you know? Are we going to do that? Is that the future of all of this? I literally do not know. And it's kind of scary to me on a whole bunch of levels, in that, again, this is where we're talking about with our kids going to school. And what's really frustrating to me is the conversation about the guns, long gone. Long gone. And now it's about apparel. And hey, how can we profit off of this? I mean, that's the really weird thing about all of this. And I don't really know. I'm looking at this just going, I don't get it. You know, at some point, you know, what do we do as a country? So I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk with our good friend Peter Morley about his trip to Capitol Hill, talk about healthcare. There's lots going on, and all of that. I want to get to that. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back with Peter Morley. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
Own 90% of the wealth, 10% of the people. Own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1964. President Lyndon Baines Johnson gave a mid-morning address in the Rose Garden of the White House. He was there to sign the Economic Opportunity Act that launched what became known as Johnson's War on Poverty. During his speech, the president declared, "On this occasion, the American people and our American system are making history." He said, "We will work through our communities all over the country to develop comprehensive community action programs with remedial remedial education, with job training, with retraining, with health and employment counseling, with neighborhood improvement. We will strike at poverty's roots. The initiative included multiple programs. Among them was a Job Corps to provide basic workplace training to young workers ages 16 to 21. Work-study money was made available for low-income college students. Assistance was provided for agricultural workers and rural families. In 1965, Congress allocated $800 million for the program, but many in Congress opposed the initiative and did all they could to limit its scope and funding. Historians, the press, and the general public have long debated the impact of President Johnson's war on poverty. Many have noted that the funding levels were never high enough for a fully effective jobs training and anti-poverty program. In 1981, Congress repealed the act during the first year of Ronald Reagan's presidency. Fortunately for many families living in poverty, the programs started as a result of President Johnson's war on poverty still remain. The AFL-CIO published an article reflecting on the 50th anniversary of the war on poverty. It called for raising the minimum wage. The article stated, "Clearly, we cannot be serious about ending poverty as long as those who get employment still find themselves below poverty." Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So, look, we're only days away from the beginning of the confirmation hearing for Brett Kavanaugh. And, day after Labor Day, they say they're going to begin holding the hearings and they're going to ram that nomination right through. And look, I've said from the beginning, I don't see a way forward on stopping this. I'm hoping the Democrats can hold the 3 or 4, red state Democrats in line and pull a Republican over like Susan Collins, because what we know is this guy is to the right of even Gorsuch. He's an extremist. He gets on the court. You can kiss Roe goodbye. You can kiss healthcare goodbye. You can kiss any federal legislative, any regulatory action. You can kiss all of that goodbye under this guy. And here to share some thoughts on Kavanaugh and also the state of healthcare in the country, our good friend Peter Morley, who just returned from our nation's capital recently with some stories to share. Peter, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. It's always good to join you on the show. Yes, I wish, I'd like to come on your show with some really great news, but I can give you some empowering news, like on how we can stop this nomination, as you were just mentioning. That I can do. I don't have the greatest news, but, that is a huge concern among the Democratic offices that I did meet with, is stopping the Kavanaugh nomination and the fact that there aren't as many constituents in Alaska where Senator Murkowski has supported health care in the past, and Senator Collins, in Maine, where Senator Collins is. There's a huge article on it in the Washington Post where, with all these things going on, I wasn't even aware of this article, unfortunately, but when I got back from D.C., that was the first thing that I shared with everyone. I met with Senator Manchin's office, and, I'm sorry to say I received a non-committal, response on where he stands on Kavanaugh, but he is in a red state, so he may just come out at the end. I don't know, and he is campaigning as well. But the truth is, no matter, if we're receiving support or not receiving support, we should all do our part and be calling our senators and encouraging them to vote no.
No, absolutely. And it starts with, obviously, the Democrats and keeping them all in line. but also you're going to need a Republican or two to step forward, or maybe even three, given the fact that I think Manchin votes for him. I fear Heitkamp does.
Yeah.
I even fear the woman from Missouri does.
McCaskill. I did meet with her office. I don't get the feeling that she would. Of course, I could be wrong, but they were very concerned about healthcare, and they were actually. I haven't met with her office before, so it was very encouraging. And I don't see that happening, but that's just based on my
right. But you never know. Look, I mean, we're in this weird time.
Yeah.
Where this nomination, this is, to me, this is the game changer. I mean, Gorsuch was one thing, because you did replace, you replaced Gorsuch with Scalia with another ultra conservative, so it wasn't a net loss. This one to me is the game. This is the one that solidifies this crazy right wing court. And that's troubling to me because, look, there's probably going to be another one in the next 2 years. I hope not, but I hear Thomas is talking about retiring, so you're maybe putting another far extreme right winger in that seat. There, to me, not a lot good coming out of the court.
No, and I mean, I guess the like you were mentioning in the intro, the Roe versus Wade, that's like almost like guaranteed to be gone like immediately. But there is this. A lot of people don't understand it, and this is probably the most important messaging that I can share with you, is that there is this court case, and it's complicated because it is tied into healthcare. There are, I believe, 20 attorney generals that are trying to declare the Affordable Care Act unconstitutional, and Judge Kavanaugh has actually had made some decisions on the ACA in the past, but they were like the most like outrageous, like ridiculous, like cases, and both times he overruled whatever was brought in front of him. So he has like two precedents already. So I did meet with some GOP offices, and that is what they're citing as well. So, again, getting back to the messaging, I think there's a lot of concern in these Democratic offices that they don't know how to, like last year it was so cut and dry, like they're trying to repeal health care. Well, this is a much more convoluted way, because this case could be heard in front of the Supreme Court, and this guy gets, confirmed. He could oversee it, and rule for it. So that there's a repeal. So, but it's not cut and dry, and people still don't understand the connection. So the messaging is it's difficult, it's tricky, but I mean, I try to encourage people every single day. There is nothing more empowering that you can do than call your senators. And I've heard this from every Democratic office too. Even if you feel they're going to vote, no, call them, thank them, get the volume of calls up. The volume of calls are the most important thing that they need to hear from their constituents. There's nothing more powerful that they can do than get the volume of calls up. That's the simple answer to how we stop Kavanaugh.
I'm hopeful. Every day I wake up, I'm hoping that they do a little bit more digging into this guy's record, which is horrible. But look, even that, they're sprinting this to the finish line because they don't want his record to be completely investigated. Because look, during the Bush years, there's a lot of hanky stuff I'm sure that went on during his time as Bush's right hand.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the scariest part for me is he's just really going to rubber stamp whatever our current president wants. And I really don't. It's more of a scary laugh than a funny laugh that was. But my biggest concern is always healthcare, and that's always been my platform, and that I've spoken out. And how do I empower, people who are scared to death? Because if the ACA gets repealed, all the protections get, repealed as well. And that includes pre-existing conditions and affects Medicaid expansion. So, that is, we're talking about 130 million with pre-existing conditions, and I believe the number is 12 million for people who have been helped by Medicaid expansion. So what happens to those people? What happens to their insurance? It's frightening. So if anything, call your senators for that, because literally all you need to do is call. If you have a pre-existing condition, I have a pre-existing condition, and I want my senator to support, or I want my senator to strike down the nomination of Kavanaugh. That's all you have to say. It's that simple, because that helps get the volume of calls up.
It's something that's really important to do. But I look at this and again, we're in this really weird period, because you've brought up some pretty huge numbers of people who are going to lose their health care. And we're going to end up, I would argue, worse off than we were before 2009.
Yeah.
And we're going to end up where, and maybe this is what we need, Peter. Maybe we need to have this taken from people. And I know this is going to get me a lot of hate mail and angry mail. And I don't want people harmed. I don't want the sick to go without care. But, we're talking about, you got to get the level of calls up. You need to call your representative. Maybe only through, desperation and pain and suffering do we react. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but I know people who have healthcare through the ACA, and I tell them, look, you're probably going to lose it if you do nothing, and yet they won't call.
Right. No, I get it. I get it. As somebody, who is dependent on subsidies myself, I not now, but I used to think, why do I need to call my government to support my health care? They should be doing their jobs. But you know what? The truth is they work for us. So sometimes when you have a bad employee, you have to remind them, hey, you got to do a better job. So we need to remind them they need to do a better job. I've seen some studies, and I don't unfortunately have time to put this together at this point, because I'm going through some personal things in my life. But stress kills. And every day that people are under the threat of their health care being taken away from them, that's stress. That's putting undue stress on people every single day. And that is, I was thinking about this over the weekend. Is there some this is a totally rhetorical question for you, Rick, but if there's anybody listening to this, if there's any civil rights attorney listening to this, is there any way to do a class action lawsuit, or is the president protected from this?
No, I don't think there's any way of doing a class action lawsuit anymore on anything in this country, because the Supreme Court has basically, outlawed all of them. So, I don't know about that, but yeah, there's a way to sue the administration for going after healthcare, but I don't know about on this level that they're putting on someone on the Supreme Court who will ultimately rule against the law. We're in really, really difficult times.
Yeah, no, we are, and it's and like you said, it is so. It's it's a basic, thing that we learn in our civics class, that our voice matters, and that really is what we need to do, and it's just that simple.
So when you were when you were on Capitol Hill and you're talking to these senators and you're talking to these representatives, what are they saying they're hearing? I mean, obviously there are people calling, not enough, and I hope more people will contact their representatives or even sit down with a piece of paper and a pen and write a letter and stick a stamp on it, which I'm told is by far the best way to get their attention. But what are they telling you? What are they hearing? What are they saying?
Well, again, the messaging. They're having a difficult time, with the messaging and reaching. They feel like they're having a difficult time reaching their constituents and trying to explain this, but they are extremely concerned that they're not going to be able to stop Kavanaugh without the support of their constituents and the volume of calls. And if we can't get Collins and Murkowski swayed, to vote against Kavanaugh. So, I mean, those are like the major takeaways, the interesting part, though, like I said, I met with several GOP offices, and in a really like bitter play on irony, or whatever irony is bitter to begin with, but I met with like Portman's office, for instance, and I heard, well, if pre-existing conditions protections are removed, well, we'll move. I think they cited Senator Grassley as, because he's a big pre-existing conditions supporter, except he hasn't come out and said anything. But that Senator Portman there's apparently some sort of caucus that's going to protect pre-existing conditions. Meanwhile, there's already protections in place right now, so it's like they're going to remove the ACA to put new protections in place, which is absurd. When you think about it. But so there's a whole bunch of nonsense going on.
Now, so let's say they do away with this. What does it mean to you personally? Because I know you've been struggling with a lot of healthcare issues. You've for a very long time, and you're one of the people that I look to for strength, because I don't know how you wake up every day and carry on this fight. But what does it mean to you personally if Kavanaugh is put on the court and they rule the ACA unconstitutional and they it's all gone now? You're still going to be eligible for Medicaid, right?
I don't know. I think New York would have protections in place, but I don't know. Undoing an act as big as the ACA. It would really depend how quickly things, were put in place. I honestly, I would think that I would definitely lose parts of my insurance, whether it's, access that I get to my medications or access that I get to specific doctors, because I have, I have to go through special, I don't know what the word is. Sorry, lupus fog right now, but to get to access, for instance, I get 12 infusions a year, one a month for my lupus, and I have to go through, prior authorizations, and I could lose access to my infusions.
And what would that mean to you?
Well, that it slows down the progression of the disease, and I've been on this medication for 2 years now, and it's greatly slowed down the progression. So my organs could eventually fail and die, and I could die.
So ultimately, and this is where the messaging is not a problem for me.
Right, yeah, no, it's not for me either.
Kavanaugh on the court means people are going to die. What the Republicans are doing, what they're pushing, the attacks on the ACA, the attacks on Medicaid, the attacks on Medicare, all of that equals people will die. And I guarantee it's going to be somebody someone in your family, may even be you.
Well, Rick, I hope to God that's not the case, but excuse me.
No, I mean, I'm talking about you particularly.
Oh, no. I got you. But what I'm trying to say is, what I was referring to earlier is that the stress that it causes every day, I can point to that in research, or maybe somebody has that research, but I can't imagine that the stress from all this, like the last 18 months, the caregivers, the parents with the children who are medically fragile, I can't imagine that hasn't caused them an incredible amount of stress, because I know for me it has caused myself a great deal of stress. But when you're a caregiver and you're already under a lot of stress because you're taking care of someone, but seeing your own child suffering. I mean, I have many friends that are in that situation. I mean, it's cruel, and it's every single day. I mean, I wake up and I struggle every day because with lupus I have an incredible amount of fatigue, but I feel like I can handle it because it's myself. I can't, I don't know. I have my own way of dealing with and coping with things, but I can't imagine being a caregiver and struggling with this every day. So my heart goes out to them.
Yeah, I mean, and at the end of this, I keep telling people, at any day, at any moment, it could be any one of us. We have no idea what tomorrow holds, and by destroying these programs, you're simply harming people, and that's the message. I mean, I don't know how much more there has to be other than taking this away, destroying this is going to kill people.
It will, and like I said, if it's not already done that from all the stress, stress is a huge killer.
And what we know from to highlight your point about stress, what we know from numerous studies from the UK, during conservative administrations, when you have this kind of austerity, when you have this kind of mean-spiritedness of ripping things away from people and making them stressed out and worried about if they're going to be able to put food on the table or a roof over their head or health care. We know that suicides go up. We know that depression goes up. We know all of the negative things that you can imagine in society seem to go up. And we've been seeing this. I don't know if you saw the report from the CDC the other day. The number of opioid deaths in this country skyrocketing, and it's getting worse. The number of suicides, I understand, actually went up. So it's bearing out right in front of us.
Yeah, I think that is the only thing that they really feel that they're. I mean, this is what I did hear as far as the healthcare front, is that there are 4 bills on opioids, and handling the crisis going on right now, and they're going to be collapsed into one, and they were hoping to push it through in August, but it looks like it's going to go through in September. But I don't even know if that's. It's an omnibus bill, but I don't even know if that's going to be enough to address what's going on, like you were just saying.
And the thing is being in a position that you're in, I'm sure you hear these stories from people every day of desperation and heartbreak. And I know that, and I know you're one of those people who carry those stories with you to Capitol Hill. I just can't imagine going into a representative's office, or one of these Republicans who's ran on we're gonna repeal and replace with pay or die. I don't know how you can sit and share those stories and know they're just not listening. And if they are listening, they're not going to do anything to help. I mean, that's where I give you credit for being you. I just don't know that I could do it.
It's like I've said to you in the past, a lot of the biting of the tongue and a lot of the I feel that I have an obligation to share the stories of the people that have vulnerably shared them with me. I have that duty to perform, and I have to make sure that their stories are shared. And the one thing that people should know is if you do have an urgent story or urgent healthcare matter, that every single Senate office and every single House representative have wonderful constituent services, and they have wonderful caseworkers, and you can contact them directly. I know who the healthcare people are in each office, so you can feel free to contact me. I'll put you in touch with their healthcare person. And I have to say, whether it's a Democratic office or whether it's a Republican office, they are incredibly quick to respond. So, we just talk about the really horrible things about healthcare. That is a wonderful service that most people are unaware of, and I have put a lot of people in touch with them. So at least I feel like I'm helping people in that way. I do go there, and I do try my best to fight. I struggle with my own illnesses, and getting on a 3:25 in the morning train, having 16 meetings, and then coming back 12 hours later is very ambitious. But I always tell people this: I never know if it's going to be the last time that I'm going to be able to make it down to D.C. because of my chronic illness. But I always feel like I want to go out with a bang. So 16 meetings. So if this is my last trip to D.C., which I don't think it is, but if it is, at least I feel that I did it. And you know what? For every call that I make to my senator, at least I feel like at least I did something. At least I tried.
Yep.
We can give our lip service and say, by the time you talk about all the reasons you don't want to call, you could have already made those calls. That's the part that bothers me.
It is that simple. Peter, I wish you the best. I have
Thanks,
nothing but
Rick.
admiration for the work you do, and I hope you the best, and I'd love to talk to you again real soon.
Absolutely. Anytime, always available for you. And thank you so much for your wonderful work. And I admire you an incredible amount. And, you are such a hard worker and such an amazing guy. And I'm so grateful to get to this opportunity and many opportunities to speak with you. And I look forward to speaking with you again in the future.
Good stuff, Peter. Thanks so much. Look, I mean, Peter Morley's one of the guys that, a true healthcare warrior, patient advocate. And look, if you want to his Twitter feed, we'll make sure that you get access to that. I'm gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. For working people, come to talk.
Together, we can make America better. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1619. That was the day that the first ship bearing enslaved people arrived in North America. It was an English warship called the White Lion that came to Johnstown in the colony of Virginia. The ship was a privateer and had captured 20-odd enslaved people from a Portuguese ship in a raid. Virginian planters were interested in forced labor to work the tobacco fields in the colony. The laws surrounding slavery in Virginia evolved over time. Throughout the 1600s, statutes replacing indentured servants to race-based slavery for life were written into the law books. In 1654, John Kaiser became the first person enslaved under the rule of law in North America. By 1662, a law was passed that children would be considered enslaved or free based on the status of their mother in Virginia. This meant that slavery could pass down from generation to generation. This and similar laws ensured slavery would grow. Historians estimate that 388,000 enslaved people came to what became the United States from Africa. Due to laws passing down slavery to children, by the Civil War, there were nearly 4 million enslaved people in the South. By the early 1800s, enslaved people made up about 1/3 of the Southern population. Initially, enslaved labor worked predominantly to produce crops like tobacco, indigo, and also rice. Some West Africans had developed valuable skills in rice cultivation that white landowners exploited through slavery. With the invention invention of the cotton gin in 1793, cotton became increasingly important to the Southern economy. The South's dependence on slave labor became more entrenched and spread westward with the growing United States until the Civil War ended the brutality of slavery.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show. Issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So what a weekend it was of golfing. I guess Rand Paul was out golfing with the Donald over the weekend, all upset about the White House counsel cooperating with a fairly lengthy amount of time with the Mueller investigation. 30 some hours over the last several months. And again, Trump maybe didn't know about it. Or didn't know to the extent. I'm not sure what the freak out is, but Donnie don't happy. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world in Washington, D.C. Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you, Rick.
So what do you make of this? You know, you've got the White House counsel actually sitting down with the Mueller team. 30 hours, I guess, is what we're hearing the number. And I guess Trump's having a little freak out about it.
Well, yeah, as a matter of disclosure, I wanted to mention that I have hired in the past, when I was in Congress, I've hired Don McGahn to represent me as he did for the Republican Campaign Committee for the House for Federal Election Commission issues, filing things. And also he served our committee as advisory capacity on federal election laws, since we ever saw that. So I wanted to get that out there, so I do know him. I have been to dinner with him, et cetera, and I have not had contact in communicating directly with him since, he's went to the White House. So I don't know what he said, but I do have an insight into his persona. You know what I'm saying? What he's about. I know him. And I'm looking at this whole thing. I don't know if people are aware of the BLT Steakhouse in Washington, D.C., but this is what started all of this, believe it or not. And you can't make this stuff up with this administration. The BLT Steakhouse. The two lawyers, which was Cobb and Dodd, and Cobb had worked, as we know, for President Clinton at one point in time. I think it was Cobb. Well, they were at lunch or eating at the BLT Steakhouse, popular hangout. They started bad-mouthing Don McGahn, White House counsel. And at the next table was a reporter who listened to everything and did a story in September 2017. Just kind of story that a lot of people haven't paid attention to, Rick. Well, the bottom line is that this insiders say gave Don McGahn an eyebrow raise because sort of looked like they were blaming him for everything. Now, Don McGahn wanted to go a different direction. First of all, Don McGahn told the president if he fired or had Sessions fire Mueller, he would resign. Number one, he didn't believe in doing that.
Right.
Number two, Don McGahn did not want to just give Mueller everything he wanted. McGahn wanted to preserve privilege, executive privilege, papers, etc. Now, Dowd and Cobb, the other two lawyers who have since been fired, they wanted to open it up. They wanted to, talk about everything. That's what they wanted to do. And so they created the situation for Don McGahn to spend 30 hours with Robert Mueller, which I think is hilarious when you think about it, okay? They did it, period. So nobody should be in shock that he spent that time. I think in part, it shows that he, in fact, is willing to, communicate with what he knows. And then secondly, I don't think it's a, quote, John Dean, because that's what the president flipped out about. I don't think it's a situation where McGahn would be compelled to in any way have such a fear factor that he himself, McGahn, did something wrong that he would have to create, exaggerations above what really happened in reality with President Trump.
Right.
So, I think it's, McGahn went in and said what he said. Now, none of it, honestly, will matter much, except Don McGahn won't be charged because he's not blocking anything or obstructing. But, Rick, I'm not so sure anything will come out of it legally unless the president sits down and answers the questions that Don McGahn was asked. Because who else can answer that? These are conversations that McGahn has had with the president, is what they want to know.
Right. And there's no way there's no way I see Trump sitting down at all, ever. And
Yeah.
I've been saying that from the beginning. There's just no way he does that. But since you know McGahn, is this a guy who, because from what I'm hearing, what some of the freak out is, Trump doesn't know what was said. Not sure on the loyalty thing. Is McGahn a guy who could be loyal to Trump, or is he loyal to country? I mean, where would you see him coming down as the White House counsel? Because as White House counsel, isn't your job to the country, not to the person sitting in the seat?
I think McGahn, and somebody may take this as a disloyal, I don't. I think McGahn is dedicated to his job as counsel for the White House, not counsel for the president, but counsel for the White House, number one. Don McGahn has, had a good history up on Capitol Hill. Now, don't get me wrong. He's conservative. He's controversial. And frankly, Don McGahn is the reason all these justices have been appointed, Rick. McGahn's the guy behind all of that. So the conservatives actually, love him. But McGahn is more, he'll follow P's and Q's of the job. Number two, he's got a wife and 2 kids. And again, I don't think he's going to panic. I don't think he's going to make up things because he goes into a panic mode. I don't think he's tape recording the president. But I'm going to tell you, he's going to protect himself and his family and the position he holds.
Yeah. So,
and he's smart.
Yeah. So the tweet earlier today, the tweet, I guess it was 2 days ago or yesterday, the tweet that came out about McGahn being a John Dean type rat. Thoughts?
No, I don't see that. Of course, John Dean responded, "I wasn't a rat. I did what I was supposed to do." But no, I don't see McGahn. And again, I don't know what he said. I have no idea. So that's all speculation. But as a person, I just don't see him getting into a panic, saying, "Oh my goodness, I didn't do this right. I didn't do that right. I've got to start, not lying, but start giving every piece of something to make this bigger than it is." And the reason I say that, when I was in trouble with the Justice Department, at one point in time through my lawyers, they asked specifically for information on 4 members of Congress. And I could have, at that point in time, said, well, yes, I saw them at dinner at Jack Abramoff's restaurant. I think they had a $1,000 bottle of wine. I don't know. Maybe it was a $10 bottle of wine. Maybe it was $1,000. Things like that, when you make statements, then the government takes it and they run. They run with it, researching who was the waiter, So I'm making a small, this is a president, I'm just making a small situation here, but they do that, right? So I just don't see McGahn as the type that's going to be there and make this bigger than it is. Therefore, they would call him, quote, a rat. But I don't see him lying, sitting there and impaling himself. No, I don't. I see others that have. Cohen at first was lying, obviously. He didn't do this with the payment. He didn't do that with the payment. Well, guess what we found out about Cohen, right?
The rumor is within the next week or so, there are going to be charges. Right. So that ought to be fun and interesting as well. Let's move on. Let's talk about your favorite guy, John Bolton. Evidently, he says it's appropriate to pull security clearances. Thoughts?
Well, actually, it is very painful for me to say that I have any form of agreement with John Bolton in my lifetime. But I would say that a review of not Brennan, again, the White House stepped all over the message, but a review of people's security, how they keep them, how they get them, who needs them. Are there, 1,000 people like this? Are there 400,000 people like this? How do you activate? All those questions I think can be answered. Now, to be able to go at John Bolton, which I love to do, nobody should know better about keeping their security clearance and using it against the president than John Bolton when he used it against Obama. And he served on boards where, the inside information, of course, garnished him money. I'm not saying he misused security information, but the fact that he knew it garnished him money.
No, I mean, this is one of those things,
no different than Brennan.
Yeah, do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
And look, I've often wondered, who should have lifetime security clearance, because I kind of understand the rationale behind it. You want people with institutional knowledge, because you want to be able to go back and say, okay, how has this played out over the decades? And the thing that gets me though is we're at a time now, and again, I don't know who started it or where this all began, but I remember as a kid, I thought those people kept quiet. They were in the shadows, and they weren't face first on TV having these kind of partisan things. And I'm uncomfortable with people having that kind of information tiptoeing around, how they use the knowledge that they have. I don't know. I'm a little uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, I think there's some things that can be tweaked with it and could be looked at. It should be done comprehensive. Shouldn't be done on a personality basis or who likes whom or who worked for what Democrat or Republican office.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, the big news today: no decision in the Manafort trial.
Well, if I'm prosecution, I'm going to be loosening my tie right now and kind of putting my face in my hands. Just not screaming yet, but worried.
Yeah, because the longer from the way the rumors, the way the conventional wisdom goes, is the longer a trial or the deliberations draws out, the better it is for the defendant. And there's a possibility that do they find him guilty on one charge, 2, 5, 10, all 18, or none? I mean, especially as this draws out.
Oh yes, the longer it goes, the better off, with nerves coming undone, etc. People holding out, the better off the defendant is.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I thought on Thursday noon it had been over, and we'd be on to talking about the next trial already. So and I hate to be conspiratorial because Manafort is kind of a mob figure, in with a lot of mob types. We're led to believe, allegedly. Is it possible? I mean, there were threats to the judge. Is it possible maybe we're looking at a scenario where there may be threats to the jurors since we didn't sequester them and, look, you see them in court.
Well, one thing that puzzles me, why, if a judge is threatened, why do you tell that publicly? I kind of don't get that.
I don't get a lot of what this judge done, but then again, I'm not a trial lawyer. Some of the people say, well, that happens. Some people say it's been, it's kind of out of bounds. I don't know. I don't know why you would throw that out there either.
The judge says he has marshal security. He's threatened. He has marshal security. Then the jury goes home for the weekend,
unprotected.
So if you're a jury, you're like, okay, who's going to be more mad at, me or the judge? Well,
I mean, that's an excellent point. And this is why, and I hate sounding, like this is a TV drama or something, but you can't not ask the question, because if you paid attention to what came out in the trial, it seemed fairly cut and dry. These two guys were robbing the Ukrainians. They were evading taxes, all of the things that evidently they've been charged with. They're somewhat guilty of all of them.
Well, there are cases where you can look at it and you can say, this one, looking at it, wow. I mean, the things that were going on, I'm not talking about where he spent the money in the ostrich coat or something.
Yeah, I don't care about that, really.
The media loves that. But I'm talking about the fact that they didn't file money. They have offshore companies in Cyprus, and they didn't file money. Now, I dare you or me to not file $5,000 each of us. See what happens.
No, absolutely, and this is the thing that gets me, and it goes back to that, that thing, if you're going to commit a crime, commit a really big one.
Yes.
I forget what comedian did. He goes, if you kill somebody, you're a murderer. You go to jail. They throw you away. You kill 20 people, they put you in a little room and they keep an eye on you and they study. If you kill 1 million people, they pat you in the back. Way to go! You must have really been busy.
Yeah, very. I think this does not bode well for prosecution.
And then I worried what the messaging out of this comes, because if he walks on this, it becomes, the whole thing's a sham, and it's all wasted time, and I fear that we don't get to the real issue, which still to me is the Russian collusion. It's still all of the things that they did during the campaign and all of that wasn't brought up in this trial. This was purely a Capone trial. This was about taxes. This was boring, and everybody hates the IRS.
Look, they're trying to squeeze people to see if they have more information on the president and the campaign. I understand that. Here's the problem I think Mueller has, though. If Manafort goes to trial and say he's found guilty of one count and he appeals it, They go to trial for money laundering with him again, and then they go to trial with Cohen for hiding $20 million or whatever, he did. And pretty soon, these are trials, and it's going to be in the court of public perception, public opinion. These are trials that has nothing to do with what you said, Russian collusion. And if there's too many of them and they go on too long, I don't care who did what. I don't care if Vladimir Putin was secretly in New York. It all goes by the wayside.
It's going to be interesting to play out. Any predictions, or are you not a betting man?
Yeah, well, I'm with you from day one that Donald Trump will never sit down with Mueller. If I had to bet, I'm going to bet that Mueller attempts to subpoena him.
Okay, well,
that's what I'm going to bet.
And
that's a bold move. I understand that, but what else does he do? If he has enough, he's going to subpoena him and go through maybe an ugly, long process. But if he doesn't, and he just says, I think he was this, and he was wrong, and he was A, B, C, D, E, F, then what happens? Nothing.
Especially if Republicans hold on to Congress.
Yeah, and then I also have a prediction that might anger some of my friends on the left, but I'm not sure if he doesn't move on Trump, that even with the Democratic control of the House, I'm not sure they'll enter impeachment process.
No, I don't. I've been saying it for a while. Get ready for 4 years. And the important thing is that don't rely on on Mueller. Don't rely on what's her name, Omarosa. Don't hope for something coming out of Manafort or Cohen, or go down the list of potential flips. Get out and vote in 2018, and then build on that and vote them out in 2020. And
it's a legitimate issue, and issues that can be used. But yes, you're right. Banking on it is the number one mantra. No, you got to have other things.
I'm hoping for it. I'd love to see it, but still build for 18 and 20, and do it the I don't want to say the right way, but do it the legislative way. Do it through the ballot box, if nothing else. There you go, Bob. I appreciate the thoughts, time. Great stuff as always.
Okay, thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day striking Teamsters in Minneapolis defied martial law. They stopped scab trucks, forcing the release of their strike leaders. Armed with bayonets and machine guns, the National Guard had patrolled the streets for nearly a week. They seized scores of strikers and union leaders and threw them into military stockades. Drivers were outraged. They defied Governor Olson and Major General Walsh, who, on behalf of the Citizens Alliance and trucking bosses, were determined to break the strike. Soon after strikers were imprisoned, drivers began chasing scab trucks across the city. Multiple reports poured in of picketers forcing trucks to stop. Some unloaded their cargo onto bridges. Others chased, captured, and damaged the scab trucks.